The fluorescent lights flickered above gate 17, casting thin, sickly streaks across the polished tile. I had been told the lower level was off limits, but the night supervisor's note had been blunt. Do not enter. A sigh of static crackled through the walkie-talkie. Footsteps echoed, my own, but for a moment, I swore there was another set, softer, delayed, dragging. The terminal was empty, silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning, yet the shadows behind the rows of chairs seemed to lean, watching. A sudden clang came from below. Metal on metal, sharp and deliberate. My stomach sank. I checked my phone. No signal. No cameras were working either. Every instinct screamed to leave, but curiosity rooted me in place. I stepped closer to the service elevator. The doors were cracked open, darkness pooling inside. A faint smell rose, stale, metallic, like blood mixed with oil. Then I heard it, a low, wheezing whisper. My name. Not from a person, but from somewhere deeper, colder. I froze. My flashlight flickered, catching something. The outline of a handprint, big, smeared, fresh on the elevator wall. My breath hitched. A sudden, echoing thud came from the elevator shaft. And then, silence. I wanted to turn back, but the elevator doors creaked wider, as if inviting me. And I knew, before I even reached the edge, that whatever waited below had been expecting me. I had walked the empty terminal dozens of times before, but tonight felt different. The air smelled faintly of bleach and machinery, a sterile tang that made my throat tighten. Gate signs flickered sporadically, half dimming, half glowing, casting long, twitching shadows across the polished floors. My name echoed off the walls as I called for the night cleaning crew. No answer. The terminal was dead. I was a security officer. Ordinary, overlooked, tasked with routine patrols. But this night, the lower level had been sealed for reasons the memo never explained. Do not enter. Simple words, but they pressed against my chest like a cold hand. The walkie-talkie crackled again, but instead of static, I thought I heard a whisper, a syllable dragged out in slow, deliberate rhythm. I shivered and ran my fingers along the cold steel railing that led to the stairwell. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The hum of fluorescent lights above was steady, almost rhythmic like a heartbeat, but not mine. My flashlight trembled as I moved toward the elevators. The doors were closed, but one had a thin gap. From the darkness inside, the faint smell of oil, damp concrete, and something iron-like curled up my nose. I thought of the memo again. Do not enter. And yet, a part of me, the part that hated rules, the part that wanted to know what not allowed really meant, took a step forward. A metallic clang reverberated from somewhere below, the sound traveling up the shaft like it was laughing at me. My heart hammered. I glanced at the camera feeds on the portable monitor I carried. Black squares stared back. Dead. Nothing. Not even the red recording light. Who's there? I asked, voice cracking slightly. Only my echo answered. The shadows behind the ticket counters stretched unnaturally as if leaning toward me, and I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. A silhouette, tall, thin, crouching just beyond the rows of empty chairs. When I turned, nothing was there. But the feeling remained, watching, waiting. I tried to shake it off, focusing on my steps, counting them deliberately, grounding myself in routine. But each footfall sounded louder, exaggerated, as though someone, or something, mirrored my movements. And then a whisper, soft but clear. Why are you here? I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. No one was supposed to be in the terminal. Not anyone. The stairwell door creaked, a long, drawn-out groan that seemed too slow, deliberate, like it had a life of its own. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to call the supervisor, even though I knew the walkie-talkie wouldn't work. But something, a compulsion I didn't recognize, drove me forward. Step by step, I descended into the lower level. The faint hum of electricity above faded until it was replaced by a deeper silence. Not absence of sound, but the kind of silence that presses against your ears, makes your chest heavy. I could feel it crawling over me, cold and oppressive. The walls here were different. Concrete, rough, with stains I couldn't identify. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching unnaturally, dripping along the edges like they had weight. My flashlight caught something, a handprint, dark, smeared across a support beam. I blinked. It hadn't been there a second ago. A sudden clang from the far end of the corridor jolted me. My flashlight swung instinctively, catching nothing. But the air shifted. Cold, pressing, expectant. And then I felt it. The unmistakable sense that I was not alone. Something unseen, close, watching. A whisper again, closer this time. Not words, just breath. Too heavy, too slow. My skin crawled. I realized I could no longer tell if the echoing steps I heard were mine or someone else's. I wanted to run, but my legs were led. My head spun as I tried to rationalize. A prank? A trespasser? Maintenance crew? But the air, the silence, the feeling, it rejected all reason. And then, from the darkness beyond the stairwell, a single guttural voice. "You shouldn't have come." The words hit me like ice. And for the first time, I realized that the warning on the memo wasn't just bureaucratic caution. It was literal. I took another step forward. And that was when the lights died completely. The darkness pressed against me like a living thing, thick and suffocating, as I fumbled for the flashlight. When the beam finally cut through the black, I realized the lower level wasn't just abandoned, it had been forgotten. Dust layered everything in soft gray, and peeling paint curled along the edges of walls like the brittle skin of some ancient corpse. I tried to retrace my steps back to the stairwell, but the corridor seemed longer, twisting unnaturally. The terminal above had obeyed logic. This place did not. Every shadow shifted as I moved. Every sound, metal creaking, faint drips, echoed as if the building were breathing, alive in some grotesque way. At first, I told myself it was fatigue, imagination. But then the whispers started. Faint at first, almost drowned by my own heartbeat. "Leave, leave." The voice was childlike, desperate, distant yet close. I froze, listening. The echo seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. A door at the far end of the hall creaked open slowly. Not violently, not abruptly, but deliberately inviting. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I stepped forward. The room beyond was a storage area, empty except for stacks of metal crates. My light swept across them and I thought I saw movement. Something shifting between the shadows. I spun, but nothing was there. Then, a photograph on the floor caught my eye. I bent down. It was an old security photo, yellowed with age. A group of employees posed for a team picture, smiling for the camera. But one figure had been scratched out of existence. The blacked-out space was jagged and uneven. Something about the way the light caught the edges made it feel like the figure had never existed. I shivered. A whisper echoed again. "She didn't leave." I stumbled back, knocking over a crate. It crashed loudly, and for a moment I thought I heard footsteps retreating, fading into the distance. I held my breath. Silence. Then a soft voice, almost mournful. "Don't look." The sound of the voice dragged me back in time. Memories I hadn't lived but that my mind insisted I had. There had been rumors, of course. Employees disappearing overnight. Maintenance workers never returning. Security footage that vanished or showed blank screens. Stories whispered in the break room about something that waited on the lower levels. Tales dismissed as urban legend. Yet here I was. I moved deeper, compelled despite the terror gnawing at my ribs. The walls here were different, etched with scratches, names carved in haste. Some were dates, others just cryptic symbols. My flashlight trembled in my hands as I traced a name. Marla, 1976. Beneath it, a jagged line that looked disturbingly like a claw mark. And then I felt it. Breath on the back of my neck. Not hot, not warm, but icy. I spun, flashlight swinging wildly. Shadows danced, but there was nothing. Still, I knew I wasn't alone. A door creaked open to my left. Beyond it, the faint outline of a figure. Not moving, not fully visible, but tall, impossibly thin, as if it had been stretched by the darkness itself. I froze. The figure tilted its head, and for a second, I could swear I saw eyes reflecting the flashlight, empty black pools that stared straight through me. I shouldn't be here. I whispered almost to myself. The figure tilted its head again. No reply. Just silence. Then, slowly, it vanished. Not walked away, vanished, like it had never been. My rational mind screamed at me. Impossible. Hallucination. Exhaustion. Fear. But the evidence mounted. The handprints on the elevator wall, the whispers, the photo with the scratched-out employee, the names carved into the concrete. I continued, following a long corridor that led to what appeared to be the old baggage claim area. Conveyor belts sat frozen, dust thick over the metal rollers. My flashlight caught something moving on the far side, a shadow that slithered along the floor, detaching from nothing, always just at the edge of my vision. A faint voice whispered behind me, "Stop, or you'll never leave." I spun, catching the faint outline of a man, or something pretending to be a man. The eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. I swallowed hard. I'm security," I said, voice shaking. The figure tilted its head, and the air grew colder. Then a low, rasping sound came from the vents above, like metal grinding against metal. I shivered, realizing the building itself seemed to be alive, watching, anticipating. I remembered a story from an old coworker, whispered late one night in the break room. Decades ago, a maintenance crew had worked the lower levels. They had found something strange in the old cargo tunnels, something that didn't belong. Rumor said one of them vanished, another went insane. The supervisors denied it. Everyone forgot. Everyone except those who remained. I stumbled across an old maintenance log, lying on a cracked table. The entries were mostly mundane, until the final page. Something moves below. Not human. It watches. Do not go alone. Never go alone. I swallowed. Alone I had gone. Alone I had descended. Suddenly, I heard movement behind me. Not slow, not careful, but deliberate, marching toward me. My flashlight flickered, and in its brief darkness, I imagined the tall, thin figure reappearing. I whispered a prayer I didn't believe in. "Show yourself," I shouted, voice trembling. "I have security clearance." The response was silence. Then, soft, dragging footsteps circling me, echoing unnaturally. I turned, heart hammering, but the corridor remained empty. I was losing time. Minutes felt like hours, hours like days. My mind clung to rationality, but the lower level refused reason. Shadows moved independently of their objects. Whispers came from nowhere. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, yet my steps made no sound. A faint glow appeared ahead, old emergency lights flickering weakly. As I approached, I saw something scrawled on the wall in rust-colored streaks. "You can't leave. Not tonight. Not ever." I froze. My stomach churned. The air thickened, pressing on my chest. I realized then that my fear had a shape, something watching, patient, waiting for me to break. And then I heard it clearly, a whisper directly in my ear. "Why did you come here?" I spun, but no one was there. My flashlight caught the conveyor belts again, and the shadows crawling over them like living things. One belt moved slowly, as if powered by invisible hands. Boxes rattled and shifted, though the mechanism was long dead. I stumbled backward into the baggage claim area, heart racing. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, unintelligible but insistent. Shapes emerged at the edge of the light, tall, twisted, humanoid, but always just outside the beam, always vanishing when I tried to focus. I sank to the floor, flashlight trembling. I tried to piece together the story, the history of this place. Something terrible had been here, decades ago, and it had never left. Employees disappeared, whispers spread, photos scratched out, names etched into walls. The horror wasn't gone. It was patient, waiting. And now, it had me. The air shifted suddenly, colder, heavier, almost liquid in its presence. I heard the sound of something crawling across the ceiling above. My flashlight flickered, and I caught a glimpse of dozens of black, glistening shapes moving in unison. Impossible creatures, twisted reflections of humanity, watching me, counting my breaths. I bolted for the stairwell, convinced that rational thought could still save me. The steps stretched endlessly downward. When I reached the landing, I realized with sickening certainty that the stairwell had changed. Doors I remembered were gone, walls I recognized now twisted and alien. The building was no longer a building. It was a trap. A faint, distorted voice echoed from the shadows. "You were warned." The whispers joined in chorus, voices of the vanished, the insane, the forgotten. "Do not leave. Do not leave. Do not leave." And I knew in the marrow of my bones that I was not imagining this, that the lower level had been waiting for someone like me. Curious, foolish, alone. I pressed forward, deeper into the heart of the terminal secrets. Every step sank me further into the nightmare. My reflection in a shattered panel caught my eye, pale, wide-eyed, shaking, and behind me a shadow moved independently, mimicking me perfectly. The building was alive. I was trapped, and there was no one to save me. I ran blindly, every step echoing off the walls of the lower level. The corridors no longer made sense. Stairwells twisted impossibly. Walls bulged. Ceilings stretched upward into darkness I couldn't comprehend. The air was thicker here, tasting of rust and rot, clinging to my throat. The flashlight flickered violently, each pulse of light revealing fleeting shapes. Tall, thin silhouettes that crouched, slithered, and then vanished as I tried to focus. The whispers were louder now, overlapping in a chorus of accusation and despair. They spoke my name over and over, weaving together all the voices I'd heard before. The lost employees, the maintenance crew, the ghostly remnants of forgotten nights. Why did you come? You shouldn't be here. Leave, never leave. I stumbled into a vast chamber, the terminal's old baggage hall, transformed into something unrecognizable. Conveyor belts twisted into impossible angles, some suspended midair, others coiling around the support beams like serpents. Boxes opened and closed on their own, rattling with sounds like bones clicking. Shadows pooled along the floor, crawling toward me with intent, coalescing into shapes vaguely humanoid, yet grotesquely distorted. One of them stepped forward, taller than any human, impossibly thin, with elongated arms that dragged along the floor. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if mocking me. Its eyes, voids of pure black, stared into my soul, and I felt my chest tighten, as if the air itself was being siphoned from my lungs. "Leave or join us," it whispered, its voice a rasping echo that layered over 100 other whispers. I screamed and ran. Every corridor was a maze, but the building guided me, bending space around me. Doors that had been to my left were now on the ceiling. Stairwells twisted like ribbons of stone. Time itself seemed to stretch and break. The second hand on my watch spun in erratic loops, then froze entirely. The entities multiplied. Shadows slithered across the walls, mirrored my movements, dragged shapes out of the darkness. I tripped and fell to the ground. When I looked up, dozens of them crouched in the corners of the room, eyes glinting. A distorted whisper hissed, "You can't leave. You're part of it now." My mind reeled. Part of it. I didn't understand. Panic clawed at my rationality, trying to make sense of this impossible place. But sense was useless here. Only survival mattered. I grabbed the flashlight, swinging it wildly, trying to catch a target. Every time the beam struck, the entities disappeared, vanishing, but leaving behind a cold, crawling presence. A shriek echoed from behind me. I spun, and for the briefest second I saw it, a human form, pale and gaunt, tethered to the ceiling by thick shadows that twisted like cords. Its eyes were wide with horror, mouth moving silently, lips flapping as if trying to speak but only letting out silence. I tried to reach it, but my legs wouldn't obey. My breath came in jagged, burning gasps. The shadows moved closer. My flashlight flickered again, then died. Darkness engulfed me completely. I was not alone. I felt a hand, or something like a hand, brush against my shoulder. Cold, heavy, impossible. I spun. Nothing. The whispering voices erupted in a deafening chorus. "Stay, join, stay, join." The floor shifted beneath me, rising and falling like waves. I stumbled backward, hitting a wall that wasn't a wall, but something soft and yielding, pulsing beneath my touch. The entities pressed closer, and I realized they weren't merely shadows. They were the remnants of every lost soul, every employee who had vanished. Their fear, their desperation, their rage, all coalesced into this living nightmare. I tried to run toward the stairwell, toward what I hoped was safety, but the building laughed. The stairs stretched, the railings curved into the void. Hallways led nowhere. Doors opened into walls, windows into black infinity. I screamed, a raw, primal sound, but the echoes twisted back at me, mocking, distorting my own terror. Then I heard it, a single human voice, clearer than all the others. Faraz. I froze. My own name. Not the whispering chorus, but a voice intimate, familiar. It sounded real. I turned. In the distance, I saw a figure, half shrouded in shadow. Familiar features. A colleague. A friend. My mind latched onto hope. I ran. As I neared, the figure dissolved into hundreds of smaller shadows, writhing and merging into the darkness. The whispers grew sharper, cutting. You were warned. You cannot escape. The temperature plummeted. I could see my breath, hanging in frozen clouds. My limbs trembled, but I forced myself forward, toward the faint glow of what I thought might be the stairwell. Every step was agony, every heartbeat pounding like a drum in my skull. Then a voice, a whisper, then a scream simultaneously, cut through the chaos. Do you see now? I stopped. In the faint light, I could see them. Dozens of figures, once human, now twisted into grotesque parodies. Their mouths opened impossibly wide, stretching across faces that should not move that way. Their eyes were black hollows, reflecting nothing. They advanced slowly, deliberately. I stumbled backward, hitting a wall that wasn't solid. My reflection stared back at me. My face pale, eyes wide, mouth trembling. But it wasn't quite me. Shadows moved behind the reflection independently, forming a second figure, an exact twin. It mimicked every move, every expression, and when I turned, the twin followed, never breaking the mirror. A sharp, metallic clang echoed. From above, a shadow fell, slamming to the floor with a sickening crack. I realized the ceiling was no longer stable. Dark forms twisted in impossible ways, falling, crawling, reaching for me. My vision tunneled. My mind screamed. I could no longer tell reality from hallucination. Leave, leave, leave. The chorus repeated. But I couldn't. I was trapped. Every path led back to them, to the shadows, to the abyss that the lower level had become. My mind fractured further. I tried to speak, to call out for help, but my voice returned distorted, warped by the echoes of the building itself. Then, from the deepest darkness, I saw it, the origin. Taller than all, stretching impossibly toward the ceiling, its shape constantly shifting, humanoid yet alien. Eyes like voids, limbs that bent and stretched, moving in impossible directions. The whispers formed words, solid and terrifying. You cannot leave. Not now, not ever. I tried to run. My legs buckled. The air weighed down on me, suffocating, thick as liquid. The walls twisted inward, the ceiling pressing closer. Shadows surged like waves, engulfing me. And then, something inside me snapped. Not fear, not survival, but recognition. The horror wasn't just around me. It was inside me. Every heartbeat echoed with the voices of the lost, every breath drawn filled with shadows. My reflection in a broken panel revealed the truth. I was no longer alone. I was part of it. Already. I screamed. The sound swallowed me, bounced back distorted, then merged with the chorus. The shadows enveloped me completely, crushing the line between me and them. The building pulsed with their presence, alive, sentient, unyielding. Escape was no longer possible. The last coherent thought that pierced the chaos. I had been warned, and I had ignored it. Darkness swallowed me, and the lower level exhaled, patient, eternal, complete. The stairwell I thought I had been chasing no longer existed. The corridors I had fled down were now empty walls, and the lower level of the terminal stretched endlessly, like a cavernous tomb built to trap time itself. I had stopped running, stopped screaming. The entities, The shadows, the distorted forms, the impossible reflections, had absorbed my panic long ago. I wandered blindly through the darkness, my flashlight long dead, my senses fraying. The whispers were gone now, replaced by a silence that was louder than any sound. The absence of noise pressed against my ears, filling every cavity in my mind. Every thought echoed in a hollow, repeating pattern. Trapped, alone, forever. I stumbled into a room that seemed familiar, yet wrong. Rows of empty chairs faced a boarded-up counter. Dust hung thick in the air. A single monitor flickered weakly, showing static and an occasional shadow darting across the screen. I leaned closer. For a moment, I thought I saw my own face staring back at me. Pale, wide-eyed, frozen. And then the screen went black. Hours or days passed. I could no longer measure time. The fluorescent hum of the terminal had vanished entirely, replaced by a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to originate from the walls themselves. My footsteps echoed endlessly, or perhaps there were no footsteps at all. The lower level had consumed them. I found myself back near the elevator. It had been the first thing I had noticed on my descent. The doors were ajar, dark inside. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to step in to see if perhaps it led out, back to the world I had abandoned, the life I had taken for granted. But I knew better. The elevator was a promise. A lie. A gateway that only went further down. Something brushed my arm, a whisper, a hand, a shadow. I could not tell. My breath caught. The entities had learned to move silently, to mimic absence, to haunt the spaces between reality and perception. I realized then that I was already a part of this place. My fear, my presence, my heartbeat, they had been absorbed. I was a ghost tethered to the lower level, a shadow among shadows. I saw it then, a message etched crudely into a support beam with a substance that looked like dried rust. Simple yet chilling. He comes for all who enter. I turned, expecting to see movement. Nothing. But I felt it. Inevitable, patient, inescapable. The lower level was alive, and I was no longer an intruder. I was its occupant, its witness, its warning. Somewhere deep in the darkness, I thought I heard another voice, human, fragile, alive. It whispered my name softly, coaxing me forward. I wanted to answer, to follow, but I could not. The terminal had changed me. The corridors, the shadows, the air itself. Everything had shifted to accommodate this new reality, my reality. There was no exit. Only observation. I sat on a cold, dusty floor, trying to remember what life had been like above. The sounds of planes, the chatter of passengers, the mundane worries of my ordinary existence. Memories came and went like flickering lights. The contrast was unbearable. The life I had taken for granted, now so distant, now a cruel illusion. Time no longer existed. I had stopped counting. I had stopped screaming. I had stopped moving. Only the pulse of the lower level remained, echoing in rhythm with my own failing heartbeat. The entities, or the building itself, watched patiently, their presence woven into the very fabric of the terminal. I thought about the warning, "Do not enter." How clear it had been, how mundane, how easily I had ignored it. That one choice had drawn me into this infinite, silent, living nightmare. My rational mind, my ordinary life, my sense of control. None of it mattered. All of it had been stripped away, leaving only fear, only awareness, only the creeping certainty that I would never leave. A faint glow appeared in the distance. My instincts urged me to move toward it, to see if it was salvation, escape, or even death. Step by step, I rose to my feet, my legs trembling under the weight of inevitability. As I walked, the glow sharpened, revealing rows of chairs, a long-forgotten terminal counter, and finally, something I could not comprehend. Hundreds of shadows congregating, waiting silently. Shapes stretched impossibly, merging, separating, observing, alive. They did not advance. They did not speak. They only watched. And in that gaze I understood. I was not meant to confront them. I was meant to witness, to remember, to serve as a warning for the next fool who would ignore the note, the memo, the simple command. Do not enter the lower level. The whisper returned, softer now, almost maternal. They are waiting. I shivered. Yes, I thought. They are. Somewhere behind me, a door creaked open. I turned. Nothing. A shadow passed by, fast, curling around corners, moving against the light, or rather the absence of it. I felt the pulse in the floor, through my feet, up my spine. The lower level had fully claimed me. I was no longer a visitor. I was a fixture, a ghost, a silent observer. I tried to call out. My voice echoed briefly, then dissolved into nothing. The air pressed against my lungs. I realized with absolute clarity that my body was here, but my mind had been fractured into pieces, scattered among the shadows, merging with the lost, the vanished, the forgotten. I sat again, accepting the inevitability. The lower level had no mercy. It was patient, eternal. I felt the pulse in my chest synchronize with the rhythm of the building. It had claimed me fully. And as the darkness closed around me, I understood the truth of the warning. It was not a threat. It was a fact. Outside, the airport hummed with quiet life. Security cameras recorded nothing unusual. Gates opened and closed mechanically. Passengers moved past checkpoints oblivious. The lower level remained hidden, a trap beneath the ordinary world, patient and eternal. And I was there, still waiting, still watching, still a part of it. I exhaled, the sound barely audible, and for a moment I thought I heard laughter, soft, distant, and impossibly cold. The silence returned. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. And yet, the presence lingered. I was alone, yet not alone. Alive, yet no longer entirely myself. A shadow shifted at the corner of my vision. I turned my head slowly. Nothing. But the pulse beneath the floor had grown stronger. The lower level breathed, patient, eternal, complete. And somewhere deep in the darkness, I realized one final, horrifying truth. I would never leave. Not now. Not ever. And the next one would not either. The silence returned. The lower level waited.